welcome to Detroit in Black and White, our Saturday edition. I'm Adolph Mongo. Allan Lengel, co-founder of Deadline Detroit.
Hey,
How you doing, Allan? You're going to be with us for first part of the show.
First half of the show, then I'm doing a guest lecture virtually at a university. So
you're going to put a lot of people to sleep, right?
It's I'll probably speak for an hour and a half. It's George Washington University. It's a class on emergency preparedness and communications.
What is a mandatory class?
It's probably, I think it's a master's class. It's run by a friend who's a retired FBI agent. So I did it last year. I was actually in person, but this year I'm doing it virtually.
So tell us a little bit about it, Allan, if you don't mind. Is it, because I have a friend that works for Verizon that does all these, if you're talking about emergency preparedness. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to talk about?
Well, partly I'm talking to the classes about how, there's people in there from the FBI, U.S. Attorney's Office, all these. I'm talking about how to deal with the press, what not to do, how when you screw up. I have some stories of when the Michigan State Police tried to cover up a screw up. They busted somebody in California with 130 kilos, and then they used this woman as a mule, as a cooperator. And so they wanted they were working a drug gang here in Southfield, which included a boxer. And so the woman agreed to cooperate. So they flew her to Chicago. They put all the dope. They put 130 kilos, because they wanted the investigation to continue. And they were told by other agencies, do not put dope back out on the street once you've seized it. And they went and delivered it. And so they had Michigan State Police sitting on the house. It was a townhouse in Southfield. And while they were sitting on the house, the garage door pops open. A Datsun 280Z comes zipping out. So they call a state trooper. The undercover guys call a state trooper to stop the guy. They stop him on telegraph. The trooper gets out of his car, and the Datsun takes off. So they're like, holy shit. So they get a search warrant, and they end up going in the house, and they seize 70 kilos, meaning 60 kilos are gone.
Yes.
So I have a source calls me and says, hey, state police fucked up. So I call one of the lieutenants I know, and I say, hey, I heard you guys screwed up. He goes, oh, no. He goes, hold on, Al. Hold on. We're going to put out a press release on it. So I thought, okay, they're coming clean. Press release. So the press release comes out an hour later, and it says, Michigan State Police executed a search warrant in Southfield and seized 70 kilos of cocaine. So I call him up. I go, what the fuck are you doing, man? I said, the story is you lost 60 kilos. You already seized 130.
Well, in other words, the 60 they got was they already had before.
Yeah. And so they tried to make it sound. And so then suddenly, so he goes, oh, Al, you're gonna mess up. You're gonna get people killed. So I called some sources, and they said it's bullshit. They can pull their people in, whatever. So I talked to my editor, who was E.J. Mitchell. And we decided, okay, we're going to let it go for now, Joe. But I told him, I said, I'm going to write a story when you're done with your investigation. So it was Labor Day. It was on Friday. It was Monday was Labor Day. Tuesday, I get a phone message from him, from the lieutenant. He says, hey, Al, we're having a press conference at 2:00. A lot of TV station want us to put the dope out on the table. So I call him up and I go, what the fuck are you doing? You're perpetuating a lie. And I said, this is bullshit. So I went with E.J. Mitchell over to the state police post in Livonia, and we sat down, and the lieutenant brought in the sergeant who's the head of the investigation. And he says, Allan, when we tell you everything about this case, we're convinced you're not going to publish anything. So I said, no promises, man. So they laid out the case, which we basically knew. And then I say to E.J. Mitchell, I said, let's go out in the hallway and talk. And I said, you know what? Fuck them. They're like, they put out the dope. Channel 7, all these stations reported Michigan State Police makes big bust. And so E.J. says, no, let's hold off. So we agreed to hold off. They replaced the lieutenant with a captain who I knew. You might know Captain Chris Hogan.
Absolutely.
Who's just one of the best law enforcement people.
By the book kind of a guy.
Yeah, just a gentleman. And everything. But I told him, I said, look, Chris, when this is over, it's going to be a front page story. And so it took a year before the indictments came out, and then we had a front page story in the Detroit News, how the Michigan State Police lied and covered up. And, I ran into the lieutenant, who's a very nice guy. I ran into him at a FBI Christmas party, and he's like, oh, well, you screwed me and blah, blah, blah. I said, hey, just doing my job. And subsequently, we're still friends on LinkedIn, and he wrote me and said he respected me for what I do and stuff. But I tell, it's one of the stories I tell to the class, and I say, don't lie. Don't turn one story into 5 stories. Don't turn a one screw up into a major screw up and cut. They always say the cover up is sometimes worse than the crime.
Well, I worked with an editor. He would have ran the story. He'd have said, he said, screw the Michigan State Police. They fucked up, and we're gonna run it.
Right.
And then you get these yahoos from Channel 7, Channel 2, and 4. They got a big story, and the real story. You sit there and saying, this is all bullshit, but you can't do anything about it.
Unfortunately.
I was going to say, when the press conference was happening that day, I knew the guy from Channel 7, one of their people there, one of their producers knew the real story. And I called him up and I said, what's going on, man? And he goes, I said, what are you up to? And he says, I'm doing what you should be doing, going over to the press conference. And I said to him, I said, how the fuck can you do that, man? It's a lie. I said, you can't. I said, you can't do that. And they put a story on saying state police sees 70 kilos. So it's like, just disrespectful. It's like, I'm not going to disrespect the cops and have 200 kilos in my trunk. And I expect them to have some respect for.
Did they ever find the other kilos?
I don't know if they did.
It went into somebody's arm, up somebody's nose, and somebody died.
Unfortunately, you remind me of a situation that I guess I was involved in. It was about 30 years ago that maybe a little bit got lost, but not that kind of number, but it was a significant amount. And it's really unfortunate when police have drugs in their possession and they put it back on the streets. That's a really bad look. And I'm going to save that story for another time, but probably not in the podcast.
Well, thanks, Jim Nardone. But that what you just said, Allan, and people, I believe it, that the media is very selective at what they do, and they do it well. When Kwame ran for mayor in 2001, as part of the opposition research, then we had a whole ton of shit on him. You had a ton of shit on his mama.
Right.
When she was a state rep in Lansing. You had a ton of shit in the media, and the media never reported it. They kept it. And then all of a sudden, when he become a bad boy, we're going to release it. So, yeah.
I don't think patting yourself on the back when you lose 10 kilos is really a good thing.
That's what I'm saying. And it's the media responsibility. When you handed a gift, you should run with it. Or Nixon would have stayed in office if the Washington Post had Jeff Bozo the Clown as the owner, because he would have fired Woodward and Bernstein and said, get the fuck out. You can't do that. So you got to have an independent press and reporters. I work for a paper in Colorado Springs where the publisher, Oklahoma Publishing Company, very conservative, editorial board, very conservative, but they never squashed stories. They never came in the newsroom and said, you know what, we believe Ronald Reagan is a liberal, because that's what they really believed. But you go ahead. The news was separate, editorial was separate, and the ownership was separate. These days, you do something wrong, you get a phone call and say you can't run that, or you get the fuck out.
Can we say hello to some of our friends?
Can I say something real quick?
Absolutely.
Gil Hill was a interesting. I left town and he ran for mayor, but before that, they were trying to get him in an FBI sting. They were meeting undercover agents and they were posing as money launderers. They met him at the Hyatt Regency and one of them said they were looking for him to hook them up with businesses to launder money. And they said to Gil, they said, hey, because we had the transcript from it was sealed, but somebody leaked it to me. And it said, hey, one of the agents said to Gil, hey, you're a pretty big deal in town. You ever think of running for mayor? And he said, oh, no. He said, I got so many skeletons in the closet, the press would have a field day. But by the time he ran, he had pretty much kind of a free pass.
And the press didn't do a damn thing. Go ahead and acknowledge some of our viewers.
Talk to some of our friends. Hello, Derek, right there at 10:01 a.m. Good morning to you. Karen Winston, good and blessed morning to you. On Purpose, welcome back, Adolph. I cringe when you're not on the platform, as we do as well on Purpose. It's just not the same without Adolph's spirit. Thank you. Jill is trying to form a defense, I think, against her car and that it wasn't her. I'll take your word for it, Jill.
Good to know. Statute of limitations is up.
Yeah, Miss Sheila. Shadur showed up and showed out. Let's get it done. And Karen saying her 280Z was in storage, but did you have possession of it, Karen? Did you know exactly where it was during this time period?
Do they make 280Zs anymore?
No.
I don't think so.
Oh, well,
that's way back.
Never wanted that car.
Well, and Jill took me until 84. So is that before 84 or after that this incident happened, Allan? It was
in the 90s.
Okay, so you're clear, Jill, I think.
They could have replaced the dope with sugar.
Right. They should.
Preseason, Sheila, and there are little to no starters playing. I hope they're talking about the NFL and not Detroit. And you're not talking about Detroit in black and white.
Hey, you know what?
We have the starters.
And I don't care about the sports, but I want to say that to our good friend Eric. Listen, man, the young man would have fucked up in the exhibition game. People would have, the critics would have said he didn't belong on the field. Now he did had a good game, and now people say it don't count. You can't win for losing in some of this shit, It doesn't count. It counts. All of it counts. They're evaluating them. Lengel Tigers don't count, but they count. You have nightmares, don't you, Allan? That you're gonna wake up and Cleveland gonna be in first place.
You know what? They were. It looked like it yesterday. There's still 6 games above, but Cleveland was winning 9-1, and the Tigers were down 5-3, I think. But Tigers end up winning. But you know what? I've adjusted my expectations for the Tigers. I think they potentially can be explosive again, but they're pretty streaky right now.
And On Purpose says the mainstream is the 4th branch of government, and I think maybe we'll have some time to talk about that a little bit later. I was looking at what Terry Moran said, which I think is kind of fascinating. On Purpose says, I hear you, Eric. Me either. Kenneth Reed, our old friend Kenneth, who came to see us once. Where you been, Kenneth? We made it through the hard-hitting primary. I'm recharging my batteries. Well, you can do that.
I'm going to disagree with you, Kenneth. It wasn't hard-hitting enough for my taste. And I want to know, do you think that it's going to get down and dirty and they're going to come out swinging?
Deborah Harris, good morning, Deborah. Thanks for tuning in. What's at the bottom of the mainstream? Sludge. Okay, and that's On Purpose. On the field, like slave plantations, On Purpose is fired up this morning. And Eric says, good morning to the young geezers. I think he's talking about us. Geezers, all right. Go ahead, Allan.
I have a question about, the reference of the players being part of the plantation, all the stuff. I mean, I'm curious what Adolph, what you think. I mean, some argue and say, some of these guys are getting paid $50 million, $25 million. I mean, their low salaries in sports are what, someone makes 300,000. We think like, oh my God, they're
But
exploding.
still, people don't think they have their rights. It's like that was they compared to some slaves had it great. Uh, 3 meals a day, and enjoy the comforts of home, but they were still a slave. But when you say you're a slave on a plantation and you're making $50 million a year, I don't see me feeling sorry for some of these folks that's playing pro sports. Now, I have a problem. Now, what's the percentage of people playing sports?
It's small. It's very small.
No.
I mean, when you look at your whole team in football, on the college, University of Michigan, how many people?
Especially when and they make a lot of money for these universities. What I get upset with is that a university will fight to keep Joe Blow out from the neighborhood from getting a engineering degree going to Michigan and shit, but his brother Bob or somebody else's neighbor who don't have a great academic record, but he can run and play football or basketball. He gets in the same school, he gets a full scholarship. And here's a guy that worked hard in school, does his homework, etc. And he is smacked around saying you can't get in there. But the universities use these athletes, and they make a lot of money, and they don't give back to the community and to the schools where they came from. So yeah, you can say it's a plantation, but the plantation people, the rich get richer, the poor it stays the same. When you have athletes that make all this money, and you read the stories of them going into strip clubs and throwing away $50,000 here, or why care you bought a bottle of fucking champagne for $15,000 and all this shit. Now, yeah, it's hard to feel sorry. It's hard to feel sorry when you see a lot of them walking around with $300,000 worth of jewelry around their neck and shit.
But Allen Iverson could ball.
Yeah, they can. Yeah, he can, and he blew $50 million, but he had a agent that was very, very smart that hooked him up for life. But you read about these guys go broke. Oh, I spent $75 million. I'm happy now. Or they're in prison because they're trying to beat the NBA pension fund. You get all this fucking money, and man, you're 19, 20 years old now. You 18. And you sign the contracts to go to college to play sports, and you getting $1 million a year or whatever the fuck you get.
But shame on these businesses. Good morning, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
True Sensation. Why are we not preparing? Why the Detroit Lions are a business? Why are they not preparing these young people?
I think some are. I think the NFL and stuff. I think some are trying to.
Before you go on, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and give you the floor, Allan.
Homeownership opportunities are rising in the city of Detroit, and there's a house out there that's right for you and your family. You don't even have to worry about credit or getting a loan. You can win a house for as little as $1,000 and pay for the renovation cost as you go. It all starts at buildingdetroit.org and the Detroit Land Bank Authority. Our auction and Own It Now programs offer a variety of houses and neighborhoods all over the city of Detroit. These homes are in desperate need of repair and new ownership. You can begin by going to our interactive map and detailed property listings to find the right fit for you. It won't be easy, and renovation costs are not cheap, but our compliance team is there every step of the way. We will help you track your progress and connect you with local discounts to save you more money. We have already sold more than 15,000 homes in the city of Detroit, and our inventory is shrinking fast, so you don't want to miss out on this wonderful opportunity. Start your home buying journey today by visiting buildingdetroit.org.
Okay, Allan, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think some of these young people are getting some instruction in terms of handling their money. But, you know, I used to talk to, now he's passed away, Bill Halls from the Detroit News, was kind of an old timer covering the NBA. And he said, you know, there's these kids, they're 22 years old, they're 23 years old, they're in the NBA. They've got these multi-million-dollar contracts. They get $175 a day per diem for food. He says, you know, they're kids. Like, remember when we were 22, what we were eating? He said they go out, buy 3 Big Macs for dinner. You know, I mean, to have that kind of money at that age, we didn't have, you know, when we were in college or whatever, man, I was working janitor at the dorm.
We didn't have shit. I remember I got a journalism scholarship from WJR.
Oh, really?
Go to U of M.
Huh.
Anyway, and I got these grants. They gave you the money, paid off your housing, tuition, and you know, I had all this money. To me, it was a lot of money.
Right.
$5,000. I put it in the bank. You know, like. My mother happened to call me. She's just making conversation. She said, you pay your tuition, etc. She said, you must have had a couple of dollars left over.
Sure.
I said, yeah. She said, how much? I said, $5,000. Never mentioned it. The next day, there was a knock on my dorm door. It's my old man. Let's go to the bank. He came and got it. I gave it to him. He left $500 in my account, and they took that money, and you need it later on. But my roommate says, "Man, you crazy? Why you tell your parents you had that money?" Because people was going with a little scholarship money. They was buying stereos,
right,
pounds of weed. I would tell you what some people did with leftover money from scholarships or grants. Well, schools got smart. They started just paying directly to the university, but it was like you give a kid that's 17 or 18 over $100 in my day. You had $200 in your pocket.
You were in trouble.
You could do a lot. Now imagine you got $1 million in the bank, and your old man made no more than $30,000 or $40,000 a year.
Right.
Now you driving a car that he only dreamed about.
That's right.
Well, you know, somebody mentioned Allen Iverson there. Allen Iverson had an entourage of all his buddies.
Yeah.
And that's what you also see as some of these guys end up with entourage, all the people they've grown up with. And they'll have like 10 people, 8 people they travel with, and they spend all the money and shit, and they end up broke.
Like Elvis. Allen Iverson was like, I mean, he was a celebrity.
Well, Elvis let his manager, who was a fake, he wouldn't let him tour Europe because Tom Parker wasn't his real name, and knew that if he left the country, he couldn't get back in. Yeah. So, yeah, man. The boxers. You read the horror stories where when Joe Louis during World War II fought and gave all his money for U.S. bonds and stuff, and then after that, the IRS wouldn't give him a tax break. So he owed the IRS till the day he died. You know, shit like that you hear. You know, though, what happened to my money? Oh, you know, we bought you a Cadillac, we bought you a fur coat, we bought you this, and you know, we deducted. Well, they did that with the record companies.
Hmm.
How many people Barry Gordy cheated out of royalties and shit?
Oh my God.
Probably a whole lot. And that's not just him.
Say hello to Ronald Hinkle Sr. Good morning. We hope you have a great day too. A good Saturday morning.
And before you go, Allan, why don't you give us your outrage of the week?
My outrage of the week. I don't know that I had. I mean, I always find what's going on in Washington. Just they fired some of the FBI agents who were head of the January. They were supervisors over the January 6th committee, and the FBI Association has come out with a statement saying FBI agents don't get to pick and choose their assignments. They're assigned something, they do their job, and we see people being fired because they were prosecuting crimes as their job called for. I just find it's outrageous, but that's one of my many outrages. And what's going on in Israel. I mean, Netanyahu. It's just I've said, look, Netanyahu and Hamas, both people need to grab them by the scruffs of their necks and say it's over. You give back the hostages. You get the fuck out of Gaza. Hamas, you step aside. You let either the Palestinian Authority or some Arab ruling group come in. It's just going on, and both Hamas and Netanyahu are doing everything to stay in power. And as long as the war goes on, they both stay in power. So
yeah, that's right. Okay. Well, thanks, Allan.
All right. Okay. Well, everybody have a great show.
We'll see you on Wednesday. And,
all right. Sounds
don't
good.
put too many people to sleep.
I got it's like a filibuster. I'm going to be doing like 2 hours. But anyways, thanks everybody. Have a great show. Whoops.
Felicia, hello, DBW, Detroit in Black and White. On Purpose said the Motown Museum stands as a music crematorium. I think we can touch on that in a minute. I don't know if I like that. On Purpose says Allan. Willis also says, Willis Martin, Motown was the greatest R&B label of all time. It may have been the greatest for its time, the greatest label of all time, regardless of...
I was reading where, when the Beatles made the first album, series album, they covered some Motown songs. But when they came to Detroit and they wanted to go to Motown and they took them to this little small house, it was like, is this it? It's like, is this Motown? Because they was expecting something different. I was in a restaurant one time when I was working for the city, and young girl came in there. She couldn't speak English. I think she spoke German. And she asked somebody, all you hear was Motown, and so I had a piece of paper. She was looking for the Motown Museum. It came here. I was like, yeah, man. I've never been to the museum. Have you?
I have not.
Okay, we right here. And now that Barry Gordy trying to claim fame for it, it was his sister, Esther Edwards, who kept it alive with the help of the city. Coleman Young was a big fan of Motown and of the museum. So, yeah, now it's expanding. I thought it should have been in it should have moved it to where the DIA, et cetera. Do you think it's
I'm not sure about that. I like where it is. I'm not sure. I think
fix the neighborhood up?
I do. I think that would be the thing to do. A couple more comments. Eric's talking about Bobby Bonilla. I think you're right. It's the New York Mets, and he'll be making money.
He's a slave
for the next 30 or 40 years.
They call it in his day when he collect $1 million every year.
Whatever it is, it's a ton of money over the next 30.
He hasn't played in 15 years or something.
It's been quite a while. Yeah. Eric also says there's a mandatory financial literacy seminar that rookies in the NBA and NFL must attend. Hopefully you have to keep people engaged, as Eric knows, who's working on that every day of his life. Larry Bird is the gold standard. He's not a happy guy, Willis, I don't think. Larry Bird is Larry Bird.
And I tell you who else that took their money and never spent it. Chad Johnson.
Oh yeah,
You remember?
Ocho Cinco, you mean?
He lived in the and they didn't know he was living in the training center for the first year. He didn't spend his money, and then people used to see him with all this jewelry and stuff. Come to find out, all of it was fake. He never,
Really?
he never. You know, some of these guys are pretty smart. They don't spend their money. You know, it's like they don't go out and I got 25 cars in my garage. How the fuck can you drive all the cars, man?
Well, if Aiden Hutchinson still lives with his parents in Canton or Plymouth or wherever, he's not going to be in a minute because
It's like the actor Nicolas Cage. He went bankrupt. He had 7 houses all over the world. What the fuck you need with 7 houses? I'm just wondering, man.
I don't get that at all.
You're a single person. You got 42 rooms, 20 bathrooms.
It's for show. It's for show.
Well, be like Warren Buffett. He still lives in the same house. That
On purpose said Malcolm X once said that black people sing and dance too much. Well, I don't. He may have said that, but I don't know if I agree with that. 9 followers said he never said that. Yes, he did.
well, show me the quote.
That's fine, Eric. We all need to go over to Detroit in black and white. We need to go out there on West Grand Boulevard and do a show on the front porch of the Motown Museum.
They doing.
We could all do it.
John Mason has a show about Motown on Sirius Radio. You know, it comes on every Saturday. You know, Motown is still Motown is.
It's the history of this country more than
Yes.
I think it's wider than people look at it.
When Nelson Mandela came to Detroit and spoke at Tiger Stadium, first thing he said when they were locked up, they was listening to Motown. I'm like, you know, so
You know, it's the British musicians, the Rolling Stones, the Beatles. You talk about the King. All these bands wanted to come to learn about Motown, and that bass line.
and then when they moved out, it ceased to be. Did it cease to be Motown? I think
They moved to Los Angeles in the 70s.
I think they lost that.
Edge.
Yes, I think
That's Detroit spirit.
it was something. I can't put my finger on it. It's like moving the New York Yankees to Tampa. Are they the Yankees? No, they lose something. You know, can you imagine the Detroit Tigers playing in another state?
I get it.
Well, some teams had no problem moving. Boston moved to Milwaukee. Milwaukee moved to Atlanta, and never had a problem with it. You know, Philadelphia A's moved to Kansas City, to Oakland. Now they moving to Vegas.
The Las Vegas A's.
But there are teams that have been able to do that, and nobody, you know, they accept it. But then there's some brands that. You can't change the brand, you know. And Motown was a brand, was a name. You know, you say Motown, you knew what they were talking about. They're talking about Detroit. Say the Motor City, talking about Detroit. If you say the Motor City today to young folks, do you think they would say Detroit?
No, I don't think so.
No. No, if you say Murder and Mayhem, you might get somebody to say Detroit. So, as we look at the past 3, 4, 5 months with all these shootings of these kids dying, but it's just not in Detroit, and I'm looking at the greater Detroit area of these horror stories of Pontiac, where kids are living by themselves and
Yes.
treated like the inmates in a prison where the mother had food dropped off, but never looked and to take care of the kids, or the kids died in the casino garage.
Well, that's leading
You
into
know.
you're leading into my outrage, but
Go ahead.
that's on purpose. Motown left Detroit abruptly. It was a sad and suspicious situation. And money changes people,
Well,
right?
the investors in Motown, and I never did buy the story that Berry Gordy borrowed $500 from his father to start Motown. He might have got some money from his father, but
I heard he got it from Shree.
well, he got it from somebody, you know, and there was
You're
a
right.
tree out there. He got it from somebody,
I'm kidding.
and I think those investors saw an opportunity to say, okay, we can make it big in Hollywood with movies, etc. But it never happened. Go ahead.
Marshawn Lynch never cashed his
That-
game checks.
Right.
He's a smart man. And Deborah Harris was at the Motown Museum, and she said it was a great experience. Eric says he can set it up at the Motown. I think we ought to try and do that.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about my outrage if I could,
Go ahead.
just for a second. Ask what our viewers think about it. Ask what you think about it. Unfortunately, we lost Allan, but so in Temperance, Michigan, which is a nice little town, it's kind of a suburb of Toledo, but it's well kept, nice neighborhoods, nice homes.
Great wrestling program.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Bedford High School. There's a lot of people that live down that way. It's not a small community. The sheriff's office had an incident with a young family that was living in a tent down there, and apparently they were living in this tent. So the sheriff's department on November 30th of 2023 went to this tent and found these kids living there. And CPS basically said, there's food. I guess there was a mattress, some food. It looked like donuts because you can see it on the body camera. And it was safe for these kids. Mother, her dad, and two little kids lived there. Well, they called CPS, and CPS said poverty is not neglect. We don't need to do anything. So they continue to have a case with these. They were called again in December of 2024. Kids were all sick. They're outside. They're living outside in a tent. CPS again declined to do anything. Felt that these are decent living conditions. Eventually, they were living in a car, and CPS and the sheriff, his name is Troy Goodnow, I'm not familiar with him, said enough's enough. I guess the sheriff's department decided to get these kids some safe lodging, right? And the mother and her dad. But the sheriff testified in front of the House and said, "What the heck is CPS doing? Why aren't I in charge of CPS?" And I want to go back to January of 2023 when a young mother and two of her three kids died in a field in Pontiac. Yeah. And in February 25, which we're all familiar with, is a 2-year-old and a 9-year-old died of carbon monoxide poisoning in a casino garage. Where is CPS? It's time for them to do something. Why don't they have a strike team that says we have an immediate problem? Let's go out and address it. They're there to solve problems, not to play politics.
Well, you missed one where the parents had the kids sleep on the porch in the wintertime. Remember east side of Detroit. Or we can go back several years ago where the mother put two of her kids in the freezer, and they've been complaining about her for years, and you see it all the time. You know, Jim, I know people and grew up in neighborhoods where they knew families where the kids were mistreated, you know, and nobody come to the rescue of these kids because nobody wanted to get involved.
Isn't that CPS's job? Why can't we knock down barriers and say we have an emergency? I guess lice were falling out of these kids. They said they haven't had a bath since last year when they had contact with them this summer. They haven't had a bath in 2025.
So what they running around with lice?
Like head lice is falling out of kids' hairs.
I don't even think bed bugs want to be bothered with them.
But that's passing the buck. Poverty is not neglect. Nobody's saying this parent is trying to neglect her kids, but she cannot take care of her kids. Somebody needs to help, and that's CPS's job. It should be the sheriff's office.
Well, let's go back years ago where you remember Nathaniel Abraham?
I do.
His mother, to her credit, his mother went there, went to the authorities, went to the police,
Oakland
went
County.
to everybody,
Oakland County, right?
said, I have a kid, he's young, but I can't control him. You know, he's out on the street. Nobody would give her any help. First thing they wanted to do, he went and started shooting up the neighborhood and unfortunately killed somebody. 11 years old. Now, what do you do? All of a sudden, everybody want to get involved and lock him up forever.
Well, you know where he ended up, a place that you're familiar with, W.J. Maxey Training School.
But then when he got out, he was destined for failure from day one. And you know, and the police followed him. And listen, he never had the opportunity to just grow up. He back in jail right now. Yeah. So we have parents that fight to get help, and then we have the Crumleys who said, fuck it, you know, let's buy them a gun. Or we have the woman in Pontiac who, okay, I got 3 kids and locked them in the house, don't come out, but send them food. They got no running water. And it's like these kids survived. I don't know how they.
And nobody called CPS.
Nobody. And then the neighbors, and the neighbors know, nobody says anything. How can you live next to a house and you know there's kids that's living over there, but you never see the kids?
But by CPS standards, poverty is not neglect. They have a bed. They had food. CBS is saying, "What do you want us to do?" That's your job.
They take baths. It's like, you know. Oh, in the meantime, when they arrested this woman, her nails was done, her hair was done, and you know, her kids look like they've been locked up in a concentration camp. So, yes, we have an election where our candidates. This was not at the top of their platform. Nobody talked about what we do with these kids, how we stop these shootings, how do we work with law enforcement to control some of this bullshit that's happening in our neighborhoods. All we hear about is fucking affordable housing and shit. What is fucking affordable housing? I say you make your kids safe. I go to bed at night and you worried that a bullet gonna come through and kill your kid. What, you gonna sleep under the bed? You know, criminals are laying siege to a lot of our neighborhoods, not only in Detroit, but we got them out when they cross 8 Mile Road. You got some of the same issues. People are mad at the world, and either they shoot their loved ones and then kill themselves or whatever the fuck they do. But no one is addressing the situation. You know, we get the same lip services from some of these do-nothing politicians who our Congress people tell us, oh, we have brought home 50 million here, 100 million there. Where's the mental health clinics and all these other places we need to have to deal with some of the trauma that these kids are facing every day? It's like in a war zone. when you in the military and you've been in a war zone for 6, 7 months or a year and shit, man, you got to, when you come out of that, you got to get some kind of help. You know, we just send these kids, move them on.
I'm looking at a few of our comments here, and something I said, Eric says is funny. I'm not sure I said anything that was funny, but horrible situation, Deborah Harris. Not enough preempted actions regarding CPS. I mean, what is the definition of child protective services if it's not to take care of our kids? How many of these events are going to happen before somebody says, whether it's a governor or the president, whoever, Congress says, when somebody calls for help, you got to help people, right? Put the kids up in a hotel, do something. The money has to be there. If we have money in this great, big, beautiful bill, there has to be money to take care of kids, right?
Well, you know, it starts at your local level. How do you take care of kids?
Deborah Harris makes the point of the kids sleeping on the porch, sleeping on the porch. The parents were scared of the kids sleeping on the porch.
And listen, there was a time where you could take your kid and put them in a home. You know, you put them in a juvenile detention hall, and whatever. Well, you know, it was always some abuse. We're gonna take a break, and we're gonna come back and continue this conversation. Detroit in black and white.
Nearly 30,000 vacant lots all over the city of Detroit are for sale right now. That's right, nearly 30,000 vacant lots are available now, starting at just $100. The lot next to your house or the lot down the street. Make it yours today in just a few simple clicks. Find out if it is available by visiting buildingdetroit.org. At the Detroit Land Bank Authority, side lots are just $100 and neighborhood lots sell for $250. You can apply and pay online today by visiting buildingdetroit.org. And if you don't see the lot you're looking for, call our offices. Our phone number is 313-974-6869. Again, that is 313-974-6869.
Okay, we're back. Go ahead, Joe.
Just a few more comments. On purpose says our endangered youth are still here, shaking my head. Well, you're absolutely right. What happens to these young people if we don't take care of them? It's no fault of their own. Those two kids didn't decide that they wanted to be in a casino parking lot. Those kids that died in that field in Pontiac, that should have been our call to action. They froze to death out there. 2 out of 3 kids and the mother. Right now, there's a lawsuit suing the Oakland County Sheriff's Office. I don't know what they did or didn't do, but lawsuits, these kids are gone. They have no chance. Their mother's dead and they're dead. Eric says that definitely CPS job. That's definitely CPS's job, and what a horrific story. It is a horrific story. Another horrific story. Happy weekend to you, Jill. Nathaniel Abraham is one of the worst examples of CPS failure, Eric, and On Purpose agrees. On Purpose says these new housing projects, they look like they were made of Legos. Someone needs to explain to CPS what the word protective means. Eric, exactly right. That's a definition, child protective services. And Karen says the band played on, sadly.
Well,
thanks, Eric, for your comments.
Well, you know, but we have a mayoral race, and nobody's talking about these kind of issues. None. Zero. All I hear is I'm a champion of the people, or I'm going to build Detroit one block at a time. It just doesn't resonate with our young folks who think it's worth their while to go out and cast a ballot for someone to lead the city for the next 4 years. So we can talk about kids all day long, and it's like talking to this wall.
When is it going to be important? Why wasn't it important when those two babies died in Pontiac, or when those two babies? Not even, I think one was a little bit older here in the casino. When will it end? Is my question. It's not going to end in Monroe County when CPS says, "Oh, it's not our problem, Mr. Sheriff." It won't end. It's just going to continue to happen, right? There's kids all over this area that are out there. I don't care if they're in Ann Arbor or Ypsilanti or Jackson or Adrian. There's kids living like this, and CPS is saying that it's not our problem.
Well, you can go to the schools and see some of that all the time.
And Ms. Sheila mentions Engler talks about mental patients out in the public. What do you expect? You may be right, Ms. Sheila. Chaos is real. We don't need to go away to war. It's on the civilian streets.
England been out of office 20 years or so, and you're right. England closed down these health facilities, but we haven't had governors since then. Where are they?
But couldn't CPS tell in 5 minutes in Temperance, Michigan, that this mother was not well? Couldn't they tell in 5 minutes in Pontiac that this mother was not well? Hi, Janet. Good morning.
You were a top cop out of Trenton. Did you ever get any calls like that? That you had to send officers to somebody's house because they had a neighbor said, "I need to go check. You need to check that family out."
Yes. Actually, I called CPS when I was a brand new rookie officer, and they basically laughed in my face. I had a concern. Well, I didn't think the kids were being taken care of very well, and I saw a child sharing a bologna sandwich with the family pet, and I said, "This you can't." The cat and the kid should not be, sharing a bologna sandwich.
God.
And they laughed at me. And it was years and years before I ever called them again.
Because it's kind of funny.
Well,
but it's not funny.
Filthy house.
Yeah.
Animal not cleaned up after, or 2 animals or 3 animals. And I said, these kids could get sick here, right? And they basically said, "Oh, we're good." They closed it out in 24 hours.
Don't you think some of these caseworkers are burnt out?
I don't care if they're burned out. I don't care if you're a police officer, a firefighter, or a CPS worker. If you take the job, you better do the freaking job. I don't care if you're burned out. I don't care if you don't like that you had to go to 3 armed robberies in a week or 3 neglected kids in a week. You have to continue to do it. You have a job. You've taken a responsibility. And if you can't fulfill your responsibility, get the hell out.
Well, people argue that you shouldn't be able to call the police or anybody on people the way they protect their house or run their household. But now we see where we're putting parents on trial for the actions of their kids, who basically, was given a free reign to do whatever they wanted to do. So how do you deal with that?
I don't know what the final solution is. I know not getting housing for people that are dying.
People get arrested for whooping somebody's butt. No, not if it's done right. Well, but you can't do that anymore. You really can't do it in the schools because you got some irate parents that come up there and wreak havoc at the schools. Did you get disciplined at home as a kid?
Occasionally. But the point is, as Deborah said, we just can't give up on our kids. But when we run into a situation where a kid has no control over the situation and the parents are not able to deal with them, that's the role of government. That's the role of government. That's the role of You know, when it takes the sheriff to have to say CPS didn't do their job, I'm going to do it for them.
I've heard stories as a young kid where folks have told me when back in the 30s and 40s, a parent couldn't control their kid. They put them to give them to the county or the
Really?
state, and not permanently, but it's like you serving some kind of time, discipline. You know, you think we need to go back to those days?
I don't know about that,
You
but
drop a kid off like you drop your clothes off at the dry cleaners. You know what I'm saying? Okay, I don't need them back for another 3-4 months. What can you do with them? You know, you need to go to boot camp. It was a time when a judge say either go to jail or go to military. Those where are those days?
that's
You
a
know,
great point.
yeah, you know, and a lot of times those folks they got it together. Not all the time, but most of the time. We don't have those options. These kids don't have these options.
Well, the good news is the only good news out of this story is those two kids and their mother are still alive. Not so in Pontiac. Not so the kids in the casino. Not so in so many other instances.
And you think the kid, and somebody said parents are scared of the kids.
And Miss
You know,
Sheila, I share that with you. I share that experience with you, Miss Sheila, once or twice.
well, when I was in elementary school, we had a phys ed teacher named Mr. Dunlap. He was a big guy. He had to weigh about 300 pounds. He had a paddle. He did not play. You know, he sit there, you go participate in the activities, but then you knew when you went to see him, the teacher had a list of folks that acted up in class, and there was a line. You know, you got hit in the hand, and the bad ones, he take them in his office. You know, can you do that today? No, you can't do that today. You know, you got parents that go crazy, or you hear the stories of parents come up to the school where the kid was acting up, and teachers was, you know, wasn't that was afraid to do anything and take a belt out and beat the kids in front of the class. You know, you can't. The parent will be in jail, and if you hit a student, they're gonna press charges against the teacher, or some parent gonna come there threaten you with a weapon. So, child protective services is a joke.
I can't imagine when we went to school that if a parent showed up in the principal's office because one of the kids acted up and the parent had to leave General Motors or wherever they worked,
They wasn't leaving.
Ford, or
They
if
wasn't
they
leaving.
had to leave
Yeah.
and they had to come and deal with that kid, the kid might have got smacked. And I don't think anybody was calling Child Protective Services
No,
at that
there
point.
ain't no question. Well, we come to an end. We're going to be back next week, next Wednesday. We should have a full house with Miss Vanessa and Allan. Your final thought, Jim?
My final thought is an election just took place in Detroit, a primary, and the general is coming up in November. Let's push these politicians to do the right thing. Voting is only part of it. Holding them accountable is something that we need to do in all these communities.
Well, we need to do that. Thank you, Teresa, and thanks to all the folks that tune in today to chime in on Detroit and Black and White. Thank you.